Assalamu alaikum. As you know, I love history, brothers and sisters, and I love to teach history, in particular to Muslims, so that they can learn from history and teach it to others. Our history is absolutely fascinating. I always talk about British history and how it is connected to the history of Islam. Where I am right now, as you can see, is a historic place. This is the famous Conwy Castle. It was built in the 13th century by the English King Edward I, and the chronology of the castle is basically it was built between 1284 to 1287 CE, and there is a famous movie about the king who built these castles. His name was Edward I, and the movie is Braveheart. In this movie, it is shown that the Scottish freedom fighter called William Wallace fights against the English to keep them out of Scotland. I'm not going to go into that history. For that, you can watch the movie. I simply want to introduce that king, Edward I. Edward I was a very interesting king, very controversial as well for a number of reasons. He tried to conquer Scotland. He conquered Wales successfully, and in order to keep his occupation in place, he built this particular castle and many others like it. There is a castle called Carnarvon, there's a castle called Beaumaris, there is a castle called Harlech. All of these castles were spread around North Wales to maintain, to sustain his occupation of North Wales. And this is a fascinating place. This particular king was interesting for a number of reasons, as I mentioned. One reason was that he actually went to fight crusade. He visited the Middle East. He went for a crusade in 1270s, and he was even attacked by a Muslim assassin. He was nearly killed in Acre, and he managed to overcome the attacker and killed the attacker. He was a very strong guy physically, Edward I. He was also known as Edward the Longshank, and he was called that because he was very tall. He is currently buried in Westminster Abbey in London. His tomb is there. He was a very interesting figure. The reason why I mentioned him is because he also is attached to the history of Islam somewhat or somehow, because he went on the crusade. And he went on the crusade during the Mamluk period, when the Mamluk Sultan Baybars was governing Egypt, and he was trying to get rid of the Crusaders. And he was a sultan who finally defeated the Crusaders once and for all. He took the castle in Syria called Crac des Chevaliers, or Qal'atul Hassan. Qal'atul Hassan was taken by him in the 1290s, and that fortress was one of the strongholds of the Crusaders in the Middle East, in Syria, in the land of Syria today. So this is an amazing place. You should visit Conwy. You should teach your children your history and the history of this land, the history of Britain, the history of Wales, the history of England. It is very, very interesting, and when you teach your children history, they appreciate it more and their identity becomes stronger. I hope you will visit Conwy and other castles in North Wales so that you can learn history, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.